Hi everyone, welcome to Maximum Attack Rallying and to your Thursday dose of rallying gibberish. We're actually in the house. It's been a long time, hasn't it, since I recorded a video at the dining table, but here we are. And today I want to talk about the promoter, and more specifically 5 things I would do if I was given the new promoter contract for the WRC. I think this is a very interesting topic. I could probably come up with a lot more than 5 things in reality, but I've tried to pick my top 5 and we're going to go through them in no particular order. Starting with number 1, put more content on YouTube. That is perhaps not the most inventive, but I think it is so important. And I am sorry, but 3 or 4 minute highlight videos at the end of each day of a WRC event is crap. It's crap. It's just not good enough. It's you can't say anything in 3 or 4 minutes that's actually meaningful. And otherwise, apart from that, the WRC YouTube channel is just endlessly recycled old clips and old footage or ads for content that's behind a paywall. It's just ironically, it's not content that's going to inspire someone to sign up for Rally TV. So I don't get it, and I think the content needs to go much deeper. You know, if you're going to do a video at the end of each day of the WRC event, you know, you have to have some analysis and discussion. You have to have something for people to get their teeth into, you know. And I know a lot of people get bored of F1 comparisons to WRC and don't find them that helpful, and I understand that because they are completely different sports. But just look at the F1 YouTube channel. Just look at it. You know, they've got weekend warm-up videos before every race weekend. You've got presenters discussing what's going to happen, what to look for, the technical side. You know, and then you've got interviews with drivers, and you've got analysis from experts. There's all sorts of things, and there's just none of that substance in the WRC coverage. None of it at all. And there's no in-depth analysis. You barely get anything from ex-drivers or engineers during rally weekends. The YouTube channel is just completely underutilized. And the big question you have to ask yourself is, what is there on that YouTube channel that's going to get new people interested, let alone excited enough to actually pay their own money to subscribe to Rally TV? That brings me neatly on to number 2, which is Rally TV itself. So if you have, by some miracle, paid to subscribe to Rally TV and you watch the events live, I mean, it's hardly a bastion of insight and detail, is it? You know, I understand why they pursued this all live model. It was, and it still is, impressive that they can broadcast live coverage from all of the top cars across an event weekend. That is technically impressive, but you have to ask yourself, for a subscription product, is that enough? And maybe even more importantly still, is live footage actually the best way to present the WRC? Because I'm not sure that it necessarily is. Don't get me wrong, it can be exciting. Obviously, you know, there are some great moments across a rally weekend that are very much worth watching, but I think the promoter needs to remember who this audience is. If you are willing to pay to watch rallying, the chances are that you are pretty knowledgeable, pretty dedicated to the sport, aren't you? You know, you're not a newcomer, you're not an amateur by any means when it comes to rallying. And I think the coverage has to reflect that, doesn't it? So yes, we might be more willing as hardcore fans to sit and watch hours and hours of live coverage, but we also want more, don't we? We want depth. We want, as I said about earlier, we want substance. We want detail. You know, we're not newcomers. We know who the drivers are. We know what the cars are like. We know what the rallies are like. We want analysis. We want a breakdown. We want to see understand what's happening. We want insight from the teams and from the drivers. We want views, opinions. We occasionally get a driver part of the commentary team, but that isn't permanent. And I think that in itself is a massive miss. There's nothing wrong with having professional sports presenters because they do an important job of linking everything together. But what you need is depth, doesn't it? If you look at any other sports coverage, you have your professional presenter who's kind of leading the broadcast, and then you have your competitor trainer, coach, engineer, whatever it may be. They provide the depth, don't they? They provide the insight, and that to me is so lacking in the rally TV coverage. You know, it has improved. We do see a little bit more from drivers, but it blows my mind that we haven't found a single driver that is willing to do that full time. Again, I'm going to annoy people because I'm going to compare to F1, but you know, the likes of Martin Brundle and David Coulthard, they have become a fixture of F1 coverage, haven't they? And they become almost an institution in themselves, and they become so important to it and such a, you know, such an anchor of the coverage because they're a reliable source. And yes, I know some people don't necessarily like what they have to say, but it gives it, you know, they have credibility, don't they? They have natural credibility, and I think that is really lacking from the WRC rally TV coverage at times. And I think it can just lead it to feeling, unfortunately, just a little bit fluffy because, you know, the ones that are presenting, they do know a lot about the sport, of course they do, but when something goes wrong or the way a car's behaving, some of them haven't sat in a car, and if you haven't sat in a car, you can't give the same level of insight, or, you know, if you haven't built and engineered a car, you can't give the same level of insight, can you? So I think it just needs depth, and they have to remember who this is for, and if I'm paying for it, I want it to be valuable, or I want it to add something, and I think for a lot of people it just doesn't feel like it adds anything. Okay, so 3 is quite a selfish one, but it is really important. Now, I have shamelessly stolen this from Colin Clark, who talked about it in his latest kitchen table video, but I think he was absolutely spot on when he raised this one, and it is worth repeating, and that is that they need to make more content available to independent content creators and, for want of a better word, influencers. So if you're a fan who just watches WRC, you might not know how all of this works, but as a content creator, as someone who makes content about rallying, I can tell you that it can be extremely difficult to get good quality footage, video clips, pictures and things from events. There are all sorts of licensing agreements and rules around what you can use and how you can use it. And that makes it very difficult if you're a content creator. There was one really good resource, Red Bull Content Pool, the last WRC event that seems to have stopped allowing you to download video of the top WRC cars, which is a real shame, which is why you might have noticed that my videos haven't had as much of that footage in recently. And to me, that seems entirely self-defeating, because if you don't make that footage and content available, it becomes much more difficult for independent content creators to create good videos of their own, and that obviously has a knock-on effect. I understand that you don't want people just copying and pasting an entire highlight show into their own video and just, you know, purging and plagiarizing all of your stuff. So I understand there are challenges around it, but at the same time, if you make it easy for people like me to access loads and loads of short little clips that we can stitch together and put into our own videos, that allows people like me to make better content. And if me and all of the other independent rally content creators out there can make better content, that will mean more people watching the WRC. Bigger audience figures means it's easier to get sponsorship and supporters, and hopefully to get people to subscribe to Rally TV. So ultimately, by doing that, they still win. So it comes with an investment, but I think in the longer run, it would probably be beneficial. So it might appear slightly selfish that I want that, but I actually think it would help me, them, and ultimately you. And you're the most important ones, aren't you? Because you're the guys that actually want to watch the WRC. Number 4, I would give the teams a sharp kick up the backside. You see, it is not just the responsibility of the promoter to grow the sport. The teams and manufacturers have a responsibility as well. And I can't help but feel that over the last few years, they have not always been completely helpful with that, particularly when it comes to that insight and analysis I was talking about earlier. I think it feels like it's become a competition between the teams to see who can say the very least. Don't get me wrong, I understand that there has to be a certain level of confidentiality. You know, you've built your car, you've perfected it, and you don't want everyone to know what you're doing and what your strategy is and all of that stuff. I understand that, of course. That is obvious. But I think we are probably in a position now where the teams are being more secretive than ever before. You know, it's been going on for a while now. When Andrea Adamo was in charge of Hyundai, he basically pulled down the shutter doors and said that no one could speak to anyone about anything technical. And It feels like that has now become the norm in the WRC, and in my view, it is completely self-defeating. Completely. No one is expecting the teams to share every single detail, but it feels like the drivers and the team personnel, the engineers now say basically nothing at all. They won't tell us anything. If there's a problem with the car, we might get told, oh, there's an engine problem, there's a braking problem. We never get told anything about what it actually is or what might have caused it or what the solution might be. If a car isn't performing properly, it'll just be, oh, there's no feeling in the car. Or maybe in an afternoon loop, oh, well, I went faster because there's a better feeling in the car. Well, maybe tell us why there's a better feeling in the car. You don't have to tell us your exact geometry settings, but just say, well, we just changed the toe a little bit, or, we just added a little bit more rebound. It's not going to change the world, is it? It's not going to give everything away. Just give us something, by hiding every single little detail, you give the media nothing to talk about. If we don't know anything about what you're doing because you're keeping every single thing a secret, there's no opportunity to offer any kind of insight or analysis because we don't know what's going on. We're just having to speculate. And, ironically, we can't celebrate the fantastic and incredible engineering and technology in the cars that makes them perform so well. The amazing dampers and tyres that allow them to absorb these incredible bumps and these crests and jumps and rocks and the amazing travel and the tyres and the aerodynamics and all of this stuff. All of that stuff, which ironically enough is supposed to be helping you to sell all the shopping trolleys in the dealership and to make more people aware of your brand, we can't say anything about it because the teams are so secretive. It's pointless. You have to have a balancing point between the necessary confidentiality of protecting your IP and your race strategy against giving people enough information so there's actually something to talk about. And I would argue that right now, that balance is not in the right place. And that brings me to number 5, the final one on the list, which is almost an extension of this, and that is communication between the drivers and team personnel and the media. I think it's time for a bit of an overhaul, to be honest. I'm almost tempted to say that we should scrap formal media zones altogether because I think they're a bit crap. I understand why they exist, having a controlled environment where the drivers talk to the media. It means that they know what they're going to be doing and they don't have to think about it at other times. They can focus on other important things. But I'm not against that in principle. I'm not against the odd press conference, but I think we've reached a point where a lot of this stuff is becoming a little bit pointless. The PR side of motorsport is now so tightly controlled, and the drivers and team personnel are so well drilled on dealing with the media and, as I said earlier, being super secretive, that the moment they walk into a formal media zone or into a press conference, it's like a switch flicks, they're in PR mode, all of the personality's gone, all of the insight is gone, all of the opportunity for something good to come from it is gone, because it's just like, this is the media, I know what I have to do, there's certain things I can say, there's certain things I don't want to talk about, and it just feels stale, and like a little bit of the emotion and the personality is gone, all in the name of protecting the brand or, not saying something out of turn, and obviously we've had all this nonsense over the last couple of years about swearing, which has made it even worse. And I think, if you look back, I think that was almost one of the beauties of the WRC and perhaps motorsport more widely not being quite so polished, and drivers would have been interviewed a bit more on the fly, in the service park or at the side of a road. You got to see a lot more of that personality, and things weren't so polished, and that's actually a good thing, to be honest, because it's more real and it's more relatable for those that are watching, and it's not so formulaic, and you don't get the kind of standardized responses that we seem to get these days. You still see glimpses of that today, I must say. If you watch the Dirtfish videos, or they do recce interviews or morning interviews, you can just see the drivers are not in that formal media setting, and you get much better value out of them. They're joking around a little bit more, and that kind of thing matters to people. You know, if you're a newcomer watching the sport, seeing that, those people suddenly become a bit more relatable, and you might actually like them and want to follow them a bit more. So I think we've kind of lost something there. That said, I think the presenters themselves have a role to play in this as well. You know, I think you could say, well, you know, what's happened to asking challenging and probing questions? You know, it feels a lot of the time that the questions coming from the presenters that work for the promoter, so on the official WRC coverage in particular, you know, a lot of those questions are pretty generic and unimaginative. It's not just rallying, by the way, that is guilty of this. I was watching some build-up to the Australian Grand Prix, which is this weekend as I record this, and I saw someone ask Lewis Hamilton what his targets are for 2026, and unsurprisingly, he said that his target is to win. I mean, what is the point? Honestly, what is the point of even asking that question? Anyone could tell you that Lewis Hamilton's target is to win, isn't it? Of course it is. That's why they're all there. So, you know, I think that shows the situation that we've kind of got into now. It's like the teams don't want to talk. They kind of just want to be in a formal media zone and just get it out of the way with generic answers. And it almost feels like the promoter doesn't want to upset anyone or cause any problems by asking difficult questions and trying to get more of a response out of people. So I think what we ultimately end up with is a situation where no one is really winning, because the people that are watching are thinking that the whole thing's a bit pointless. So I think we just need a complete overhaul. We need to rethink the way that the media and the teams are interacting with each other, and maybe it does need to be a little bit less formal. It does need to be in slightly more casual settings, so that we actually get a bit more out of people. And I think both sides need to remember why they're there, and ultimately why they're there is to grow the sport. And you have to say that a bit of back and forth and some slightly difficult questions add to that, and they actually create a bit of drama and something for people to actually talk about and be interested in. So anyway, I'm going to stop rambling on, because I appreciate that this video has been a bit of a long one. Those are my 5 things that I would do if I was the promoter. Do let me know in the comments below what you would like to see. I'm sure many of you will think lots and lots of things, just as I could think of many, many more than 5. So let me know what they are. While you're there, do hit those like and subscribe buttons. I really appreciate your support. Other than that, I'm going to stop talking. So all that remains for me to say is thank you for watching, and I will see you again in the next video.